not because it's being imposed as the Bush administration tried to do.
Ramin, why weren't these Islamist parties present in all this? I mean, is this part of a clearly thought-out strategy?
I think so, yes. I think the Islamists have learned a lot from recent history. I think that disclaimers of the Brotherhood are just a ploy to implement a strategy of step-by-step takeover of the state apparatus. I believe that taking over the state apparatus in Egypt and elsewhere is their ultimate goal. Let us not forget the political Islam is a faith, is a dogma supported by sword. They have their own alternative political model. They have their own alternative social order, which is opposite to what we call liberal Western-style democracy. They have their own model, thinking that they will come and embrace Western-style liberal democracy. I think it's just wishful thinking. Let us not forget that after the Oslo process and once the Gaza Strip was handed over, millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of European aid flooded the Gaza Strip. And let us not forget that in the 90s, some circles here and in the U.S. were talking about la fin de l'islam politique, the end of political Islam in Iran, and nothing proved, and in the region, and nothing proved farther from reality. And they were saying that there is a post-Islamist, reform-minded political Islam. And all it needs is more critical dialogue, more investment, more Airbuses and IBM computers in order to reform the institutions. And they were in power, and they actually reformed absolutely nothing.
Well, just to respond to that, I agree with that analysis in general. The problem is that's why you have to create effective checks and balances to prevent these parties from becoming targeted. But they are going to play a role. There's no doubt about that.
But Hall, isn't Turkey seen as the often quoted example of where you can have a modern democracy now with a government which obviously clearly still has Islamist leanings, but at the same time is very careful not to alienate its secular citizens?
Well, I think that's been my model for Egypt. That model has been criticized, though, as a model for Egypt, but it requires a military that's willing to intervene, which is not a typical liberal notion of democracy. You're supposed to let democracy take its course in the liberal model. You're supposed to have checks and balances. You're supposed to have mutual respect between communities, religious freedom, etc. And the very ideology of some of the more radical Islamic groups is counter to that. But Islam has in the past had a more moderate and tolerant tradition, and the problem is to enter into a dialogue with these groups, and that's what's going to take place. Egypt's really the key here, because if the Egyptian situation goes bad, I think most of the region will go bad. And if you get a dialogue,
it's the canary in the
yes, it's always been the key pivotal state. When Nasser was in power, Pan-Arabism was dominant. If you don't create a stable democracy, in my view, Turkish style, with a military ready to intervene if these groups come too close to power and start trying to impose Sharia law, for example, or discriminate against the Copts or other possibilities, then you're going to have, and bring back the veil, then you're going to have a real tension. But you got to keep that balance. I think it's possible, and I think it's possible because I think the population in Egypt and Tunisia in particular are ready for the new world. They don't want to go back to the...
Ramin, yes. How important is Islam in the lives of those young people in the region at the moment?
I think as seen from my Iranian experience, it is very important. But you don't need to have a majority of young people on the side of political Islam in order to take over. What you need in times of uncertainty is a well-organized minority endowed with a coherent ideology and the will to take over
So if there were elections in 6 months' time or 3 months' time or whenever in these countries, do you think the Islamists could win a healthy majority?
Yes, absolutely. Why? Because, in our age of information and Facebook, net power, the power of the network, both digital and the physical network, has proven extremely efficient in bringing down old structures of power and authority and legitimacy. clanic authority or legitimacy, tribal or family-based or faith-based, whatever. But it has yet to prove its ability, the net power I'm talking about, the Facebook age, it has yet to prove its ability to build a new order. And why what you said is important, in the 6-month horizon or a year horizon with election, is because what is important, it's not the top-level authority, it's the local-level authority. And that's where the Muslim Brotherhoods are strong. Right. It is not Field Marshal Tantawi, which brings social services and food to the neighborhoods. It's the brothers who bring social services and food to the neighborhoods. And the ballot boxes will be at the local level. So if you do not fill in the blank left by the revolution, if you do not fill in the vacuum left by the net power revolution, the chances are that those local authorities run by Muslim Brotherhoods and political Islam will gather sufficient support in order to take over the entire state.
Let me second that. If you actually look at the vote in Gaza, you'll see that the Hamas actually didn't win the majority. It was secular parties, but the secular parties were so divided that Hamas was able to justify its power. But the next point is that you need to build up from the ground up. And if aid and investment doesn't start getting jobs for the Egyptians and tourism doesn't start coming back, the Muslim Brotherhood will be coming back. But then, as I mentioned before, you have other elements in there like Al-Qaeda, which are going to try to make the situation even more tense.
But just in regards to Gaza and Hamas, I mean, having been in the region at that time, a lot of the vote in support of Hamas was actually a vote of frustration at Fatah and the other parties.
Well, the other problem here is Israel really Israel can't reach with all the concessions Fatah as a secular group has made to Israel, and they can't reach an agreement there. That's causing incredible frustration. It's one of the reasons why Obama's popularity is so low. I mean, I think Obama was reaching out in the right direction, but didn't get the accord, and the Israelis didn't follow around, in part because they thought he was a one-term president. A, I don't think he's going to be a one-term president. And B, even if he's not, the interests are too important now. The stakes are too high. Israel needs to compromise.
Just very briefly, Ramin, if indeed there was an Islamist government voted into power in Egypt or Tunisia, I can see your eyebrows raising at that notion, but do you think the international community, and in particular states, would be willing to work with such a government?
We will be, I think, forced to work to some extent because, as you just said quite rightfully, Egypt is the center of of the Arab world. Egypt has been the heart of the Arab world for centuries. So if Egypt goes in Islamic state and becomes Islamist, we will have to work with them to some extent, although there is going to be, for decades to come, something of a Cold War.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to both of you.
Hopefully not.
Thanks to both of you in the meantime for joining me. And that's it for this edition of Talking Points. Join us tomorrow for another program. Until then, goodbye.